Good evening. I'm speaking with Jagath Weerasinghe, possibly one of Sri Lanka's best known, most revered, I might say, artists. Jagath, very warm welcome to the program. And I know you don't do too many television interviews, so we are particularly fortunate to have you, and particularly also in the current context of historic developments over the past couple of weeks. With that in mind, with that backdrop in mind, I guess the fundamental question, as good a starting point as anything else I can think of, is to ask you, who or what is an artist, and what does she or he do to project that art, or to create that art?
Well, that's a very difficult question. Who is an artist? Well,
or I'll make it simpler for you. How do you define yourself?
Well, okay, that's not that difficult. I, as an artist, I think artists have have certain responsibility. You are a product of a system, point one, and you also have a certain responsibilities to that system. And thirdly, and that responsibility does not mean you acknowledge with the system. That is, your responsibility, your job is to negotiate with the system. That's how I have always been.
So, as an artist, are you always in conflict internally and also with the systems outside?
Absolutely, yes. You see, my work beginning from early 90s and up to now, it's also a reflection of a certain internal conflict. I'm a Sinhalese and I'm a Buddhist.
Why is that conflictual?
Well, see, I'm living in a Sinhala Buddhist society, but this society is doing so many things that I would not put under the label of being Buddhist. I mean, in many ways, we have betrayed Buddhism to its core. I will not go into details right now, but that's the way I feel, and I have a right to feel like that because look at the way that we justify violence. I mean, when people take Buddhism to justify violence, that I cannot take up. I always fight with that.
And how have you responded through art to raise some public consciousness of people to appreciate your art?
Early on, like when I was much younger than this and had more hair, you see, I thought one way to deal with this is to be confrontational, rather than being very, very analytical as such. But I have realized that doesn't really help us to understand my own predicament and all the predicament of the society.
By confrontational meaning angry art? Or
being too angry, yes, right. You see, early on I was, taking certain symbols, certain motives from the past and the present and was, kind of analyzing. For example, I had this series of paintings done in the 1990s. It's called the Crumbling of the Stupa. That came as a reaction to 1983 July riots because at that time I was working at Dambul Golden Rock Temple as a trainee murals conservator. I was filled with all these ideas of being a wonderful Buddhist and a Sinhalese, and I came down to Colombo during that day and on that day and so what was happening, and I couldn't take it, and I also realized that I was psychologically or mentally part of it. This is what changed my thinking, like, how could I be part of that carnage, that Black July, even mentally, even psychologically. So that is the point that I begin to think about my own personality.
So are we talking about a dichotomy? Because you know that all cultures, however violent they may be, have always used art and artistry and culture in a sense to justify violence. So is there a true artist and a false artist? Is there a propagandist? And I don't know. I mean,
no, that's it. No, I don't know. I cannot really pinpoint whether true artist or bad artist. Let me tell you how I deal with it. Like right now, I'm as you've seen, I'm dealing with the image of Shiva Nataraja. In one hand, that's a beautiful image, visually a beautiful image, and it's a very dynamic artwork. But when you seriously analyze the concept of Shiva, you are facing something very disturbing truth of being a civilized place, being some very disturbing truth of being civilized, so to speak. What does Shiva stands for? In a way, in that Shiva Nataraja thinks he's dancing on this ignorance. So he's destroying evil and regenerate good.
So is destroying evil necessary and is violence necessary then?
Yeah, so it's like to create goodness, to create peace, you have to do violence. There's that kind of concept behind it. But of course it's not that, but it's something more religious and all that. But at the same time, so the violence is incorporated into the thing, into religious thinking. So is this telling us that, as human beings, we cannot think of peace outside of the discourse of violence? If that is so, where do we stand? How do we deal with it?
You've been almost single-handedly responsible for an art movement that really examined some of these issues head on.
Yes.
It didn't go around beating around the bushes. And I want to quote an article that I read, and it said that, begin the quote, an artist is not considered as gifted as a doctor or a street sweeper or whatever occupation he is engaged in. Therefore, he has a duty to depict the moment we live in the current frame of time through his art, and in doing so, be responsible to the social and political statement he is making through his creation. Now, cut a long story short, that speaks to me of engagement, not passive
Absolutely, yes.
Mirroring of reality. Now, as a singular Buddhist artist, how difficult has it been to engage in the manner that you have?
Sometimes it's been
some very bloody years.
Sometimes it, you get attacked by your own friends.
More often than not, I would imagine.
Yeah. For example, when I did this series of the broken stupa or crumbling of the stupa, some of my friends didn't like that whole thing. Stupa is not broken. But no, I said, for me conceptually, now it's broken. Anyway. So.
But has it been difficult for you?
Early on it was very difficult. You feel so lonely and isolated, and that may be one reason, that I ended up creating a large group of younger artists, a whole group of new artists, to kind of buttress our thinking, circumvallate the whole situation. And we have a whole new art generation and groups of artists working in those lines. What is interesting is, it's very interesting, is what happened in the 1990s, which I call a trend, because even those people who are opposing it is also influenced by that, with consciously or unconsciously, certain use of colors have come to the forefront, especially the...
So what kind of colors? Khakis?
Red, green,
right.
Blue, if you really look at the 20th century Sri Lankan art, after 4-3 group, the colors went very subdued, very subtle and very meditative, introspective kind of colors. And then in the 90s, the reds, the blues, the greens and start coming up. But with another very major motif. It is the male nude body. The re-arrival or the coming back of the tortured male body across most of the artists. Even those artists who do not subscribe themselves as part of the 90s art are also influenced by that.
I was reading about this, and it occurred to me that we seem, simply put, back in that historical moment, in that we are now confronted with a different set of circumstances. However it may be written into history, we are no longer what we were even a few weeks ago.
Yes.
My question to you is, how will contemporary artists and how will contemporary art, you feel, grapple with this new reality? Will they go back to the 90s movement of safety and security in what is known, in a sense, of responding to violence, or will they try to coin a phrase you are now trying to use, imagine peace? Which way do you think it will go?
That, when you see, chartering future is really difficult, and also not a good exercise to do when you are an artist, But I know what will, certain anxieties will be rephrased.
What will these anxieties be?
It's certain anxiety that we used to live with, okay, now this is a TV program and it's open to the public. You see this whole notion of being Sinhalese, and the notion of being Tamil. They will have to be redefined or rephrased. If you're going to stick to the same notion as before, you're not going anywhere. One of the major issues in front of all the thinking people in the country if there are thinking politicians, that would be the job. So you see, like, when you really look at certain even art movements from afar, they are not, I mean, the kind of issues that they have been dealing with are not different from what the politicians and the general public in a way have been dealing with. This is what I now.
But you are